What's up, Gould Miners? In today's episode, I have the honor of interviewing Janus, a 23-year-old real estate investor who is absolutely crushing the game as a real estate investor and as a real estate agent. I have to admit, this is one of the better episodes that I've ever had. I learned a lot from this guy, and I'm flabbergasted. I think that he is super impressive, and what he's doing at such a young age is phenomenal. And we go deep into some of the things that he is doing right now, including a full deep dive on Josh's hybrid wholesaling methodology. And towards the end of the episode, he gives a step-by-step guide on how he pieces together every single deal he does utilizing this hybrid wholesaling methodology. It's brilliant, and I think that what he's doing should be shouted from the rooftops, and so much that agents and investors alike can learn from this episode. So without further ado, everyone, let's welcome to the show, Josh Janus. Josh, welcome to the Gold Mine.
Thanks for the invite, Danny. I appreciate it.
Dude, you know, I absolutely. I'm thinking about how I first came across your stuff because I've been following you online for a little bit of time here, and you had a really successful episode. Am I right with Bigger Pockets? That's kind of how you started, and you guys had like a pretty successful podcast episode, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I kind of came from that in terms of my growth. Yep. Yeah.
So walk me through this, man, because you were, I don't know how many years old, but you were young. You're driving DoorDash, and now you are a very experienced real estate investor, and all of this has happened in a very short amount of time. So kind of walk me through what inspired you to take that step into the world of real estate, given, you know, where you were at, and like what inspired that change for you when you like decided this is going to be it.
For sure. Around 4 years ago, I was, DoorDashing. I was just taking community college classes, and I wanted to, I had some money saved up from some of my side hustles, building duct tape wallets, selling shoes, etc. And I wanted to figure out what to do with it. And, I stumbled across real estate as a potential idea to house hack and, live in one unit, rent out the other idea. That led me to Bigger Pockets, right? Because that's a really good resource to, find information regarding finding investment properties, find the right agent, etc. And, that led me to a local brokerage, Remington Lyman, who I met in person after meeting him on the forums. And then that's where I'm at today. That's kind of how it started.
You make it sound so easy, but we know it wasn't. And so what challenges did you face in that transition from DoorDash driver into making income in real estate? I know that you had a stint. I'm not sure if you still do, but I know that you had a stint as a realtor. You were making sales as well, correct? So, how did you overcome the adversity, and what adversity and challenges did you face in that transition period?
For sure. So I started in September of 21, doing it roughly full time along with balancing school. I was doing a lot of cold calling to try to find off-market properties. I wanted to learn how to talk real estate, learn about the owners in given areas that I was targeting, learn about, the prices and rents and sales comparables, who's motivated, who isn't. And that's a lot of time, and it's a lot of no money yet. So I spent a good, 4 months calling 20 to 40 hours a week, not really making any money, trying to figure this game out, juggling classes and juggling DoorDash at night. And, that was challenging. I closed my first deal around like 4 months in. That's why I decided to go all in. I stopped, all in with school, a little bit of school still. And I stopped doing DoorDash. I was just calling a lot more. And I experienced my second level of, really tough times, to be honest, because I put right around 10 deals in contract with some of the buyers that I had found on Bigger Pockets forums, along with, the off-market deals that I was calling sellers from. And my first 10 deals fell out in my first 3 months of having my license. And that was a killer because I worked really hard connecting those two people. I obviously didn't know what I was doing very well then. So it was a little rough. I had to learn the hard way, but yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you know much about my background, but I was a realtor, and then I grew my real estate team At one point, I had 35 agents working with me, and so I know what it's like to kind of climb that hill. And it's interesting because 10 deals falling apart, that sounds like a lot, but like that could happen to anyone. Obviously, the experience does play a part in it. The question, so one of the things that comes up a lot on this podcast, I have a lot of guys that previously were in sales. I think a lot of people who are are real estate investors, successful real estate investors, have some sort of sales background. I'm curious how much of that rejection that you experienced early on in your career, because if you're calling 40 hours a week, people don't realize how many no's you hear and how many people are like super messed up to you on the phone, say all these nasty things to you. How did that experience shape your eventual success and who you became as an investor?
Yeah. I took all those no's and, a lot of my friends went to 4-year colleges and I was taking community class colleges, driving DoorDash. I did not feel like I was on top of the world by any means. I was just trying to hustle, trying to put things together, and decided to start cold calling, and I was getting rejection after rejection constantly. And I really learned to figure out, like, don't focus on what you want when you pick up the phone, kind of focus on what the other person wants and see if you can actually provide them a solution. And I think that's really the biggest lesson that I learned cold calling a ton in the beginning is, okay, maybe they don't want to sell now, but maybe they know someone that does, or they want to buy something in this area, or they need a new property manager or something. And, if you can be the solution to a lot of their problems, you're going to be there for the problems that you do want to solve. If you're a realtor, you want to help them buy and sell a home, and you'll be that guy.
When I was, you're what, 23? 23. Okay. So when I got into real estate when I was your age, so you are already well ahead of where I was, which is awesome, dude. I think that's so sick. Like I think the internet has really just provided this parity to the game where anyone, northwards of like 16 years old can really start making like a massive amount of money and creating a foundation of success for themselves. So hats off to you, man, for doing everything that you've done up until this point. And, I think when I was around your age, right, so I was like 23 years old is when I got into it. And one of the first podcasts that I listened to when I was studying for my real estate exam, there was this guy. I don't remember the episode. I don't remember the guy. I don't remember anything. But what I do remember is this one line, and it mirrors the sentiment that you just described, which is, he said, "Find a need, fill a need." The most successful salespeople find the need and they fill a need. And what you just said right now, find what other people want and offer a solution, is the same thing, And so it's so true. Like you're trying, sales, a lot of people think of sales as like pushing your agenda onto other people. But if you can figure out what their agenda is and then reverse engineer how you can help them, you're going to have a lot more success, not just in sales, but like in every aspect of your life. Because as I'm sure that you found out, investing is sales.
Oh yeah. It's the same game, just different pieces.
100%. So let's walk back to that first deal. What was that first investment like?
Definitely. So that was around 6 months into being a full-time agent. I had built up a good amount of savings through selling. I picked up the pace pretty quickly, and I bought a deal as just a straight BRRRR duplex. The BRRRR method: buy, renovate, refinance, repeat. I think I missed an R in there. Oops. But yeah, people know at this point.
I think you got it. I think you got it. Yeah.
Yeah. I paid $80K. I put, $40K into it. That was the original plan. The contractor that I lined up to do the job didn't look at the attic. Didn't notice that there was live electrical wires sitting on the wood framing up top, which is surprised the place didn't burn down. But I had to rewire it, so that was a little expensive. I did learn a lot of lessons regarding contractors, when to pay them, how to check for references, etc. That was my big lesson there.
So let's talk about the financing for that deal, because I'm sure that someone is listening to this episode right now who is kind of in the same position that you were in back then. How old, like 19, 18, 20? How old were you when that happened?
Yeah, that was 18 months ago. It was actually not that long ago.
So like you were like 21?
Yeah, 21.
Okay.
21,
so
just about turned 22.
So you're 21 years old, and how does a 21-year-old come up with the money to buy a duplex? What was the capital stack like, and where were you getting the money from?
For sure. So, a lot of people get discouraged if they don't qualify for conventional financing, right? If you don't have 2 years of the same 1099, if you don't have like a W-2 that pays high enough to whatever your area requires, a lot of markets are more expensive than where I'm at. So I used hard money, which basically, if you have a decent credit score, if you got like 20K in the bank and you got a heartbeat, they'll get you the money. It's high interest. So, it's 13%, it's a couple points, it's interest payments every month. You got to get your stuff together, but it's a really good tool if used correctly in the beginning to scale and to be able to buy real estate when you don't have, the correct qualifications to meet for conventional financing.
Got it. So you used hard money. And how does someone go about, like, if, like, let's say that someone is like, okay, well, like, how do I do, like, where can they find a hard money lender? What are some resources for them to like go out there and find hard money?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, check like BRRRR that might be posting on like Facebook or LinkedIn, things like that. I built up a network of some of them at this point. So like, realtors should have them if they're investment friendly. You should ask them. Ideally, it's been a lender that they've actually used themselves too. So they have like an even bigger layer of experience to share with you.
Okay. So you use BRRRR. Is that like a free, is that a free resource? Do you have to pay for BRRRR, or can you like find all that information on like the free version of the site?
It's all free. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. So yeah. And just to add to that too, like, I think that, definitely asking asking agents or whatever, like if they know of hard money lenders, the good ones will. I think BRRRR is a phenomenal resource. Like also Google, like you literally Google hard money lenders and like tons of answers will come up. Now, I do agree with you, Josh. Like you should probably do some vetting, and probably better to work with people that have worked with people that in the past, right? Even if the rate might be a little higher. It's good to work with people that and also realize that everything's negotiable. So if you're talking to someone, they recommend you a hard money lender, you go find another one on Google. That one's offering you something for like 1 or 2 points less. Go back to the original one and be like, hey, I really want to work with you. You were referred to me, but someone else is giving me a better rate. Can you match it? And a lot of times they will. Sometimes they won't, but it doesn't hurt to ask. Right. So speaking of which, how have you, since that time, have you stuck with hard money? Are you using other financing sources? And how do you go about, Josh, negotiating those financing options?
Definitely. At this point, I'm very heavy hard money still. So I actually can't qualify for conventional lending yet. I will in April. I have the second year of the same income, but, yeah, it's been, at this point, cash for properties under 100K, and then a little bit of private money and hard money for anything over that. And just all value adds for the most part. So lots of renovations, lots of headaches, lots of fun.
Yeah. And, honestly, that's not atypical, and by the way, like, here's something that I want to add. Josh, you're in a market where the price points are kind of in that like 80 to 250 range, I'm assuming. Kind of in that ballpark. Right. So my market's like the average sales price is like 1.2, now when I was 23, the average sales price was like 850. Right. So it's gone up dramatically, but the truth is like, even in those markets, you can still do these deals. Now you're not going to do as many of them. All right. But you don't have to do as many of them in order to kind of net the same amount. So you can still find hard money. Now, the other thing too is that a young guy like you, if you had chosen to go into a market that's more expensive, maybe the only other thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe the only other thing that you would have had to find is some sort of capital partner or someone who has, a decent amount of money, has a bankroll or some sort of like personal financial statement that they can show to kind of back you up, and then you can go in on it together, right? But you're doing the legwork, the sweat equity, they're providing the check equity. But it's still possible. And that's what I want people to understand. And not sure if you've interfaced or talked with anyone has gone that route in a more expensive market. Would love to hear if you've had that experience or talked to people that have had that sort of experience and what their strategies were.
I have not, but I'll touch on something else that you're talking about, especially if you're newer, if you don't have a ton of money, right? I think there's really 3 pillars to scaling and getting deals in real estate. Number 1, I think, is knowledge, which anyone can get. If you don't have it yet, you just got to read. You got to talk to people in your market, go to local groups, listen to investors in your area, look at sales comparables, rent comparables, start making connections, find lenders, title companies, etc. If you know everyone and you know all the prices, people will bring deals to you because you're going to be able to make connections to get things done. Even if you don't find deals, if you just know everyone, you can get there slowly, but it'll pay off dramatically. I think number 2 is the deals, right? That's the one that I decided to go after in the beginning. Cold calling, straight to the owner, banging the phones, trying to make things happen. 1 to 4 units in my market. And I think very similar in other markets, it's really hard to get a 20 unit if you don't know anything and you just call the investor because they're probably pretty sophisticated, but you can call it any single family owner, right? Or a duplex owner, and they're more likely to talk to you compared to somebody that's super sophisticated. You don't have to be crazy or anything like that. And then I think the 3rd pillar obviously is money. If you have money, people will bring deals to you. So
love it, man. Yeah, those are some really valuable insights. And I would agree, even if you have one of those 3, you can do deals in real estate. Right? If you have 2 of those 3, then you can do those deals in real estate and likely have a lot more leverage, right? And if you have all 3 of those, then yeah, you're like cooking, right? But even if you can bring one of those 3 to the table, you can participate in deals in some capacity, right? I think one of the biggest mistakes that I made as an agent when I was younger is I was chasing commissions and I wasn't really thinking about taking equity in deals. Has there been a time in your young career now as a real estate agent where you have foregone commission or chipped in commission into deals with investor clients of yours to take upside on the equity play? Have you negotiated anything like that with any of your investor clients?
Yeah, so I haven't really invested in any syndications at this point. So I haven't done any GPs or things like that. But, if I have an investor that's consistently buying with me, I'll cut the commission sometimes to get the deals done or on the back end sale or whatever, because I kind of value the relationship more than the immediate cash. That's on the realtor side. And then on the investor side, my other partners are realtors as well. And we don't really take commissions on any of our purchases or sales. So that kind of doubles the margins on all of our transactions moving forward. And that helps the equity position as well.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And that's kind of what I was getting at, is that if you're the one, for example, bringing the deals, right? A lot of times realtors think okay, I bring my investor the deal and I make a commission. But I would encourage all agents to think outside the box and be like, hey, how can I negotiate? Hey, I'm bringing you this deal. I would like commission plus 5% equity, plus 10% equity. See what you can negotiate, because these are things that, might not seem like a big deal, but you're like, oh, well, it's maybe the equity play is 50 grand. Well, negotiating a 5% equity play on that's an extra $2,500. And it also ties you in more with that investor. For example, right? Just kind of spitballing with you here. If you've got that equity play, and you're like, hey, I'm gonna maybe I'll invest 500 or 1,000 of my commission into this deal, right? But I want a 10% equity play. Okay. Now here's the cool thing: when we go to sell it, because I'm assuming that these are flip deals, right? If they're not flip deals, then maybe this doesn't work, right? But if it's a flip deal, then say, hey, I'm gonna relist it. We'll cut the commissions on the listing, right, as well. But now I'm a 10% equity player. And now I'm even more incentivized to get you the highest possible price, because the more right? So now I'm a true equity partner in the deal. And dude, I wish I had done that when I was younger, because I helped a lot of flippers. I made them a lot of money. And the only thing that I have to show for it are the commissions that I made. But if I was smarter, wiser, there's a lot of agents that do that. They don't advertise it. Right? These agents don't advertise that they're doing this with their investor clients, but I promise you The best ones, then the savviest ones absolutely are, because if you have access to those deals, there's a price to pay for that. And it's not just in the form of commission, at least not in my opinion.
I like that. That's smart.
Yeah, man. You know, you should do it, bro. Like, you're young, man. You just tell them, hey, listen, I got access to all these deals, but it's going to cost you. And it's not just commission, you know? So
the annoying thing is just the paperwork. That's what I would drive a little nuts. But I think in the beginning, that's huge. You know, you can stack those up. You put 10 of those together and you can take all that equity and buy your own house yourself.
Yep. 100%. So let's switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about numbers, understanding deals, and really being able to analyze a deal and understand whether or not it's a good deal. You know, and typically this takes a lot of practice, a lot of training. So how does someone as young as yourself in such a little amount of time go from novice, right? Because at some point you were a novice, to being able to analyze and look at deals and understand them at a high level. How did you develop that ability at such a young age?
I honestly just really, really, really focused on sales comparables and tried to figure out in this market, you know, what things are important: garages, number of bedrooms, square footage, layouts, where it is on the street, driveway, no driveway, parcel size, like all that stuff. And I, over time, like pretty quickly picked up on those changes. And as an investor, if you find a deal that you got to renovate and you really know the sales comparables, you really lower your risk in terms of where your ARV is going to be or where your sale price is going to be. You know, the biggest condition, as long as you actually get the property to that standard in terms of renovation quality, as long as you can get it there and you really know the comps, like it's bread and butter. You just keep doing it over and over again. It's pretty passive. Like, you know, I'm doing, I don't know, probably like my 70th deal or something at this point. And it's like, it's the same deal I did the first time. I just have done it over and over, and you can shrink your analysis time by 100, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you actually talked about that a little bit at the beginning. I'm glad that we kind of circled back around to it. You used the word expert. And I think that, you know, expertise isn't necessarily defined by the time frame that you've been doing something, but rather the amount of hours that you've put in and the amount of time that you've been around. So you can really accelerate your expertise by doing what you just described, which is, you know, becoming a student of the game. And that's interesting that you kind of embrace this idea of becoming a student super early on in your career, because clearly it's paid dividends. And, you know, comps are comps, dude. Like, anyone can pull those. It doesn't take a lot of work to do that. It does take time though. You know, it doesn't take like a lot of, I should say, like skill or whatever, but it does take a lot of time. And that time develops into the ability to kind of look at things at a higher level. And then it does become a skill, you know? So that's interesting, man. So you talk about this hybrid wholesaling methodology, and I want to understand what you mean by that and share, you know, what that looks like at a high level with the audience.
Yeah. So it's basically the typical wholesale method, but instead of me putting the property under contract, I just take all the information, you know, pictures, videos, rent information on the roof, the CapEx, et cetera. I package that together, and then I present it to the investors that I'm working with. Right. And then if they like the opportunity and they want to offer on it, I just write up a contract, present the offer to the seller, and then they'll accept or deny or counter, or whatever the case may be. But it's a lot more ethical, at least in the state of Ohio, because you're really not supposed to wholesale as a licensed agent to other, you're not supposed to do it in general, but you can't really represent someone if you're wholesaling the property to them. In this case, right, I'm just presenting them an opportunity and sticking my standard commission in there. That's just same thing over and over again, and I can represent them.
That's awesome. So you're kind of using your cold calling then to do a couple of things. You're vetting the properties. You're like, okay, like, is this a deal that I want to do? If it is, great. But if not, then let me take some pictures, everything, and I'll come back. You know, that's a really great strategy, man. How many of those appointments do you go on per week? And what would you say that your average conversion ratio is? Either you buying the property or you being able to successfully hybrid wholesale it to an investor?
So when it was just me cold calling, I didn't have anybody else on my team. Let's say for every 10 properties that I got good information on, the seller would take a price and it was within a reasonable range where somebody might offer something close or asking. I don't know. Maybe I'd buy one and then I'd sell like two, something like that. And then the other
30%, basically like 30% of the ones that you got inside the door, you either bought them or someone else bought them.
And there was another 1,000 that didn't get in the door because it's hard to convert someone over a cold call in the beginning.
1 out of 30 you convert, or 1 out of 10 you convert, 2 out of 10 you go and you pitch it to your wholesalers or your investors. Now, like, this question just comes up in my mind naturally, right? Like, well, what if the investor tries to cut you out of the deal, right? Like, what if you give them all the information and then all of a sudden they're like, gotcha, Josh, right? So
yeah, that's definitely a risk. So, I had an attorney construct a buyer agreement. It's not exclusive. It's the big thing I tell everyone in the beginning. I'm not trying to lock you up right away. It just says that you're going to use me as an agent for any deals that I present you in this manner. So,
gotcha.
That works. I have not had anybody cut me out of 400 almost.
You've done how many?
I've done I've sold around 350.
350 houses in your first 2 years?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Josh, dude, like, let's talk about that for a second. You sold 350 houses in 24 months.
Yes. Yeah. 2022 was around 130. And then last year was like right around 200.
Holy cow. And then you're also investing in deals. You're also going on all these podcasts. Dude, like, that is tremendous. Now, are you doing this all yourself? Do you have a team now that goes out and helps you? Like, what does that look like? The infrastructure of your company or your team?
Yeah. I mean, you might laugh. It's pretty much me and 2 virtual assistants that kind of run the majority of the show. And then, I have people that help find deals. And then I have a property manager for my properties. Yep. And then I have contractors. I don't contract, I'm not out there swinging hammer and doing things like that. But, the core administration, communication, putting deals together, it's, I basically use my computer science background to build procedures really tight. I have decent follow-up systems put in place, and between me, 2 virtual assistants, we could put it together.
All right. So now I need to know. Let's walk through like the typical life cycle. Let's just say that this is something that you're hybrid wholesaling or that you're selling to your clients or whatever. Because I have to imagine that, like, for every deal you do yourself, you're probably selling like 4 to 5 houses at least, right? So the majority of them you're selling off either buyers or you're doing like, so does the 350 include, like, for example, if I put a buyer and seller together, like kind of what you just described?
Those are just houses. So I dual rep most of them, but it's like 350 individual houses that I sold, I didn't buy.
Okay, gotcha. So 350 that you've sold, not purchased yourself, and 1 house counts as 1 transaction. You don't count those as 2 sites.
Yeah. Otherwise it'd be like 600 or something.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. Wow. All right. So let's just back up here for a second. If I'm one of these, sellers that you're working with right now, from the initial contact through the time that you close the deal, walk me through like a typical life cycle. Like, you go, like you call them. I'm assuming that you have like some sort of like maybe pre-listing packet or like something that you deliver to your door. And of course, I understand that it varies for every single person or for every single seller, but like, walk me through what that typical process looks like, how many touch points and everything it requires, including follow-up. So if like, I would love to know just kind of like what the average life cycle looks like.
Yeah. So my prospecting has really evolved since I started. So I'll kind of like talk about when I was in the phase of doing 0 to 5 deals a month. There's 0 to 3 deals a month even. Right. I'm just pulling a list of 500 homes in a given area, 250 homes, hitting them. And, I'd put them in like a hot category, medium or a cold based on my conversation. A hot guy has a price. and he's going to give me pictures tonight or tomorrow. The medium guy, you know, he knows his rents. He gave me his information. And what I'm saying now generally occurs over the course of the first 1 to 3 calls. You know, the hot person I'm going to follow up with almost every single day. The medium person, when I say follow up, I'm going to call them. If they don't answer, I'm going to use a text template. I have like 50 text templates that I use that all kind of gauge around the same thing, which is, I'm interested. Give me this information that I don't have yet that you didn't tell me that I'm waiting on. You know, the medium person I'll follow up with every week or every other week. And then the cold person, that's depending on how big of an investor they are. So if, you know, if he's got 30 homes and he's old, he doesn't want to sell to me now. He probably wants to sell. He just doesn't want to sell with me. So I'll probably call that guy every 2 weeks or something like that and just try to build rapport, just figure out what he's trying to do. In the beginning, I think what really helped was I wasn't just trying to sell your home. I was like, hey, I'm coming out of college. I have some money saved. I see you bought this home. How did you get it? Right? I'm just trying to learn. And I came from a learning point, and nobody really cold calls your home to learn how you bought it. They want to say, I'll pay $200K cash for it. Right. And, you know, that kind of threw a lot of people off. And, you know, the old guys, some investor told me was that I kind of, you know, relied on was a lot of the really successful investors are kind of lonely because their friends did not do the same thing. And they're 50 and 60 and they own all these homes and they make a bunch of cash flow and they're in a great spot, but they have no one to talk about it with. Their family doesn't know the sophistications of it. Their friends are in the stock market or they have a W-2 or whatever the case may be. If you're a young kid and you're energized and you want to learn and you're willing to meet up with them even, like they're going to pour energy into you because they're looking for that.
That's super interesting. And you know what? You're not the first person that I've spoken with who's kind of used that like backdoor approach, right? So instead of coming right out and asking like, are you going to sell your house to me? Will you sell your house to me? Pretty please sell your house to me. It's more of like a, hey, you know, just out of curiosity, I'm you, but 30 years younger, you know, how did you do it so that I can learn? That's a very interesting approach. How do you transition that conversation then? So do you meet up with them? Like, do you have like a coffee meeting? Are you just kind of following up with them, checking in every once in a while? Like, and how do you, if ever, kind of transition or pivot the conversation from, you know, educate me to, let's do a deal together?
Yeah. You know, the more I learn about their situation, their buying schedule, their life situation, I kind of make judgments based on that. You know, if their kids are already out of college and they're kind of settled, that's a long-term play. I'm not going to get anything done for 6 months, 12 months, maybe, but I'm going to really try to learn from them. I will try to meet with those guys, right? You know, try to figure out their property managers or whoever is on their team. Something to note though, I think something that really helped with my scaling success is I tried to never leave my desk ever. I never go to any properties. I don't even go to my own properties. I think you make the most money in the beginning when you're just on the phone trying to make shit happen, roughly. So, you know, I try not to meet up with too many people. I try to keep that selective. You have to really be like, you know, you have to really be protective of your time as a realtor because people will suck it up.
Yeah, 100%. So hold on a second, because now I'm like, you just kind of confirmed something that I was about to get to. So what you're telling me is that you sell these houses usually sight unseen?
Yeah. So like I'll have somebody in my team bring a deal. If it makes sense, I'll put together a marketing package. I've already done the due diligence. Somebody on my team or the seller took pictures. Somebody saw it at some point already, not me. Then I send it to the investor, have a conversation, get an offer into the seller, and then they have an inspection done. I don't go to the inspections. They have an appraisal done, and I'll go to the appraisal, and then it closes. Yeah, I don't go to any properties ever.
So so what you're saying is that you either, so through a series of phone calls, what I'm hearing, you take a cold lead, you get them to a point where they're giving you all the information that you need on the property, including pictures and a price. You then package that up into a little marketing thing. You blast it out to a couple of your investors, or is it just one guy that you're working with super close at this point?
No, I work with like 200 people.
Okay, so you got a wide network of investors then that you're basically blasting this package off to. And if any of them raise their hand and say, yes, I would like to go see it, or like, are they buying it sight unseen as well? Or are they getting in there? Or okay, gotcha.
Most of them are out of state, so they don't live here. So they want to send, what I preach as a realtor, I think as an investment realtor, it's like, my job for you is to help you find properties and learn the area, right? I can go to the property, take a video and things like that, but I'm not a contractor. I don't know if the roof's in bad shape or the walls are caving in or if the furnace is bad. That's what your inspector's for. So I try to preach who does what job. I'm just going to do this role that I established in the beginning, and really I get very little pushback.
Gotcha. So then at that point, you the investor says, I'd like to offer this much. You write up the contract, you present it to the seller via phone, right? And then they're either going to be like, yes, no, I'll think about it. There's some negotiating back and forth, and then they accept the contract. And then at that point, your due diligence or your inspection period begins, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So that is insane, dude. I mean, honestly, like, that's awesome. And like, I think that's brilliant. Also, like, I don't think I've ever heard of anyone being that efficient and that streamlined when it comes to just like taking listings. Because what you're doing is basically you're matching these two buyers that's completely off market. That's phenomenal, man. That's brilliant. Good for you. I love
Thank
it,
you.
dude.
And like, when you're off market, like you're the only agent involved, so you make more money, which is great. But I like that. But what I really like is things go a lot smoother. There's no other agent that you got to have some like bully or ego or weird thing going on. It's more relationship based. And, there's off market sellers I consistently work with, and I can talk to the investors. I'll be like, dude, this would be like the 6th home I've sold from this guy off market. Like, you could talk to the other people that bought the other ones. They're doing good. And, it's honestly pretty smooth.
I want to go back to something that you just said because we glossed over it because I got excited, but I want to go back to it. Is you can make the most money by staying at your desk and devoid of any distraction. I think that's so important and so powerful, and something that, honestly, I think that a lot of agents could learn from, and people who are investors too. Like if you're trying to source deals yourself, what Josh is doing, by the way, agents can use, investors can use, wholesalers. Like, this is a methodology, a practice that basically anyone who has any interest in investing in real estate can leverage and utilize. So I think that's awesome. Wow. That's amazing, man. Super glad that we got to explore that, because I wasn't even planning on kind of diving into how you piece together those deals, but like, that's pretty impressive. So I have to imagine that at this point, you've got some pretty good systems dialed in terms of like, you get your, like, the sellers send you all this information. Your VAs probably are the ones that are putting like the, offering memorandum, for lack of a better word, or like the package together to like blast out to your people. So you've got a pretty dialed in system, it sounds like, to where you're on the phone. How many hours a day now at this point?
I haven't cold called for like a year consistently. I mean, my role at this point is basically call the buyers that are really interested in, if it makes sense for them, try to get them a contract. And if I got a seller on the fence, call them and try to use the skills that I built up to get them on the same page if it makes sense for them.
So what I'm hearing is that you have, for a year, you did a bunch of cold calls, and those cold calls have created a big enough database to where now you can just put these deals together without having to make any more cold calls.
Yeah, because especially off market, if you do a deal with a seller and it goes well, they might sell you their next home. They probably got a guy or a friend or somebody in their family that wants to do the same thing. And it just spreads like wildfire. And but the thing is, you got to bring them good buyers. So in the beginning, when my first 10 deals fell out, I brought them bad buyers and I got bit and I lost some relationships. But, that's why it's really important to vet your buyers.
If you are a real estate agent listening to this right now, and you're thinking to yourself, how the hell am I going to overcome this new commission lawsuit? And like, how am I going to continue to conduct business with this new commission lawsuit? Listen to what Josh just described like 50 times over and go do it. Listen to it enough times until it inspires you into action, because that's exactly the kind of methodology. It's exactly the kind of business practice that's going to protect you becoming a quote unquote victim. I don't believe in being a victim, but some people obviously do. Becoming a victim to the new rules that are going to be in place following these commission lawsuits. Because, dude, you've just insulated yourself from any sort of your business is protected. Like the way that you've structured it and built it now, like that shit won't affect you whatsoever.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's because it's like if you want to pay commission, you won't get any deals. Someone else wants the deal and they know I bring the deals. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think it's a very, very, very repeatable model. I don't think this is like something that this one-off weird thing that I'm doing that no one else can do. And I know because I've been training people and they're doing the same thing and they're scaling up and they're doing the same thing.
That's amazing, man. So when you're talking to these these sellers, right? These owners, are you more targeting the owners who because you said they have multiple properties? So are you targeting a lot of investment properties? And is that like the main focus?
All investors. Yeah, I don't really work with people that buy their primary home. And the reason why they own multiple is just because the homes are cheaper here. You got a lot of money to buy 5 homes in your market. Here, it's not that hard if you do it over 10 years.
Yeah, 100%. No, and by the way, like that makes a lot of sense to me. So I think the next step is like, okay, how do you replicate this in a and honestly, there are ways to replicate it. If you can segment out lists for people that have owned their home for more than 15 and 20 years, you'd probably find a lot of people who would also be willing to do something similar because, in my experience, at least, if someone's owned for that long, they typically, their kids are out of the house. A lot of these houses have been owned for so long. There's like kind of like quarter houses. They're not fit to be, they're not fit to be sold. The take some pictures, put up some put some staging up, take some pictures and put it on MLS kind of thing. A lot of these properties are actually right for deals like this. So I'd be curious how, if someone listens to this podcast episode and kind of deploys that and adds, those basically like lifers in the home. Obviously, there's some people that are going to die where they own, but there's a subset of those individuals or those primary residence owners that do sell, after they've lived in the home for like 15, 20 years, have a decent amount of equity, but not too much. If they own it outright, they're not going to sell it. But if it's like, 20% equity to like 50 or 60 and they've lived there for 20 plus years, chances are they've been pulling out some equity and they're going to need to sell at some point.
Yeah. And I think a really simple way to pull motivation if you're struggling is go to the local auditor that has all the records of all the sales. I'm not sure if that's how they call it in my area. Just look, every single home has been sold at least once. Basically, some of them have been sold 20 times. At some point, every home will sell at some point. Right. So it's your job to just be there. And if you can talk to everyone in your market and everyone knows you, you'll sell everything. Just get as close as you can to there. And the best way to do that is to get on the phones, in my opinion.
100%. So Josh, we're coming up on time here. Want to be respectful here of your time. I got a couple questions here. One of the last ones here is, what are you seeing in the market right now? And what are your plans for 2024, both on the sales side of things and then also on the investment side of things?
Fair. I think, 2023, this was the stat that I was told, it might not be true, was the least amount of homes sold when adjusted for population ever in American history. I think for the last 100 years or something. I forget what the metrics were.
I believe that.
I think it's going to go up. It's not going to be worse than that, especially with potentially rates coming down. So, I think prices are probably going to go back up. A lot of buyers have been on the sidelines. So as a realtor, I'm just kind of doing the same thing that I've been doing, trying to find more deals. As an investor, I started a couple or 2 development companies that basically buy stuff, renovate it, make it turnkey, and then I sell it to my investors that want turnkey from 1 to 4 units. So I'm trying to double the production on those 2 companies. And as just an investor, my goal is to get to 250 units by the end of the year. So, yeah.
Dude, I love it, man. I love it, dude. No, that is that's super inspiring, man. For anyone who's listening to this, and it's, dude, like 23 years old, doing what you're doing right now. And I'm sure that you would corroborate this. It's you just got to do the thing, and if you do the thing, like it's gonna happen. Now, obviously, like I can tell, you're a polished dude. You clearly give like an aura of confidence, which goes a long way especially when it comes to listings and working with sellers. Sellers gravitate. It's like a magnet. That confidence draws them in. But at some point, dude, you just got to do the work, and that's what you've done, and the results are there. So, congratulations, man. That's awesome. That's super
Thank you.
awesome.
Like when I started cold calling, I was doing it like in my closet, almost at home. I was scared getting yelled at. Like, experience is huge. I've had like 50 people come into my office since the Bigger Pockets podcast that I went on locally. They're like, man, I saw you. Can I get involved? I show them, here's how to start. I'll give you a list. 45 of them didn't even do anything. And like a couple of them stuck to it for at least a reasonable amount of time, man. Like if you stick to it, I think it'll pay off.
100%. Well, in typical Goldmine fashion, Josh, we're going to have you leave the audience with one final Gould nugget.
I think in investing, don't try to reinvent the wheel. If there's somebody in your market doing something that you want to do, just look at what they're doing and just repeat it. Don't try to do something crazy different. It's yeah.
I love that. I love it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if it works for them, it'll work for you. That's awesome, brother. That's awesome.
There you go.
Josh, thanks for stopping by, man. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. I appreciate it.